Marissa Holloway was 8 months pregnant when she unlocked her husband Daniel's phone and uncovered a secret so dark it cost her life and their unborn child's. Just hours later, she was found shot dead in their quiet suburban home, and Daniel, the man she trusted most, was the only one there. What appeared to be a tragic break-in quickly unraveled into a chilling story of betrayal, greed, and a carefully planned murder. This is the shocking true crime of how love turned lethal, all because of one decision: checking a phone. The morning of June 3rd, 2022, started off like any other in the quiet tree-lined suburb of Pine Ridge, just outside of St. Louis. Neighbors were out walking their dogs, sprinklers ticked to life on manicured lawns, and kids prepared for school. It was the kind of place where tragedy felt distant, something you'd read about, never something that could happen just down the street. But behind the closed door of one brick house on Rosemont Drive, something horrific had already unfolded at, say, 7:12 a.m., a frantic 911 call came from Daniel Holloway, a 33-year-old contractor who claimed he had returned from a morning jog to find his pregnant wife, Marissa, lying unresponsive in the hallway. She was 8 months pregnant and just weeks away from her due date. According to Daniel, he had gone out for a run at sunrise and came home to discover her bleeding from a gunshot wound. He said he didn't hear a gunshot, didn't see anything suspicious, and had no idea who could have done it. Paramedics arrived within minutes. The scene was eerily quiet. Marissa's body was found lying on her side near the hallway closet. Blood pooled beneath her, and her phone was shattered nearby. The back door was locked. The alarm system had not been triggered. There were no broken windows, no overturned furniture, no signs of a struggle. It was as if time had frozen the moment after the shot was fired. Daniel, dressed in jogging clothes and sweating heavily, stood outside, pale and shaking. He told the officers he was devastated and confused. His voice broke when he mentioned their unborn son. But the responding officers noted something else. The house was too quiet, too undisturbed. No signs of forced entry. No neighbors reported hearing a gunshot. And Daniel's story didn't quite make sense. If someone had come in and shot Marissa, why didn't they take anything? Why was the alarm system disarmed from inside the home? The police began to cordon off the house. Yellow tape was wrapped around the front yard as crime scene technicians arrived. Investigators took photos, dusted for prints, and began collecting evidence. One detective noticed a small, half-open drawer in the master bedroom, a drawer that had housed a handgun, registered to Daniel Holloway. The gun was missing. As word spread, neighbors stood in shock. Marissa was known in the community as kind, soft-spoken, and full of life. She taught second grade at a nearby elementary school and had just celebrated her baby shower the previous weekend. Everyone remembered the photos, her beaming smile, hands cradling her belly, pink decorations scattered across the lawn. No one could imagine why anyone would want to harm her. But as investigators would soon learn, this wasn't a random break-in or a tragic accident. Behind the calm exterior of their home, something had been boiling for months. And the morning silence that once defined Rosemont Drive would soon be replaced with whispers, theories, and the slow, chilling unraveling of a secret that had cost 2 lives. As detectives dug into the lives of Daniel and Marissa Holloway, a very different picture began to emerge, one that contradicted the calm and perfect image the couple had projected. To outsiders, they seemed like a model pair, a hard-working contractor husband, a sweet and nurturing wife, and a baby on the way. Their social media was filled with smiling photos, nursery updates, and countdowns to the birth of their son. But beneath that surface was a darker reality, one built on lies, financial secrets, and betrayal. Daniel Holloway had always portrayed himself as a successful man. He ran his own construction business, often boasting about projects he was managing across town. He drove a new truck, wore expensive watches, and made it seem like life was going well. But as the police reviewed his financial records, they found something troubling. His business was failing. Several clients had filed complaints, unpaid invoices were stacking up, and his bank accounts were nearly empty. Debt collectors had started calling, and the Holloways were behind on their mortgage. The pressure had been building for months, and Daniel had taken desperate measures. One of those measures was purchasing 2 life insurance policies on Marissa, each taken out within the past year, with a combined payout of $750,000. Though it wasn't illegal for a spouse to take out such policies, the timing raised red flags. One of them was signed just weeks after Marissa announced her pregnancy. That detail struck investigators as suspicious, especially once they realized how badly Daniel needed the money. Then came the discovery of Daniel's second life. Forensic technicians retrieved data from his phone and laptop. What they found painted a disturbing picture. Daniel had been cheating on Marissa with at least 3 different women over the past year. 2 of them lived nearby, and one worked at a bar he frequented. The messages were flirtatious, explicit, and full of promises. He told each woman different stories, claims that he was leaving Marissa, that the baby wasn't his, that he felt trapped. He had even booked hotel rooms under fake names to keep the affairs secret. What stood out even more was how careful Daniel had been to cover his tracks. He deleted messages daily, used secondary apps for communication, and locked his phone with a biometric passcode Marissa couldn't access. According to her friends and sister, Marissa had grown increasingly anxious about his behavior. She'd noticed him staying out late, turning his phone face down, and growing emotionally distant. When she asked questions, he became defensive. Despite her suspicions, Marissa had no proof. She was 8 months pregnant and exhausted. Friends said she wanted to believe he would come around. She even began planning a maternity photo shoot for the following weekend. But everything changed the night before she died. That night, Marissa finally got into Daniel's phone, and what she found confirmed all her worst fears. It would be the last night of her life. What began as a story of a grieving husband quickly became a tale of deception, infidelity, and greed. Daniel Holloway was no longer just a heartbroken man. He was the prime suspect in a murder that investigators now believed was calculated and premeditated. The night before Marissa Holloway's murder would become the focus of the entire investigation. It was the turning point, the moment everything shifted from suspicion to revelation. For weeks, Marissa had lived under a cloud of doubt. Her husband, Daniel, had become distant, emotionally detached, and fiercely protective of his phone. He no longer kissed her goodbye. He barely asked about the baby. And any time she reached for his phone, he reacted with sudden anger or quickly took it from her hands. She knew something was wrong, but with no proof, all she had were instincts. That night, everything changed. Daniel had fallen asleep early, unusually tired after claiming to have worked a long day. Marissa sat alone in the living room, scrolling through baby name lists and rubbing her swollen belly. Her mind wasn't on the names, though. It was on the phone sitting unattended on the nightstand beside their bed. She had tried asking him about his behavior before, but it always ended in arguments. Something inside her told her she couldn't wait anymore. Her due date was just weeks away. She needed the truth, not for herself, but for her child. At some point after midnight, she quietly walked into the bedroom. Daniel was asleep, facing the wall. She picked up the phone, heart pounding in her chest. To her surprise, it was unlocked. He had recently updated it, and the facial recognition had failed to re-register after a system reset. She took a breath and started going through the messages. What she found confirmed everything she had feared, and more. There were text threads with multiple women, some recent, others going back months. The messages weren't just flirty, they were intimate and revealing. There were explicit photos, hotel confirmations, even voice notes. One woman asked when he was leaving that pregnant chick. Another sent him a list of baby names for their future children. Marissa didn't cry. She didn't scream. Instead, she took screenshots. Hundreds of them. She saved photos, copied emails, and recorded a short video of the screen while she scrolled in case something went wrong. In the video, she whispers to the camera, "Now I know." Then she forwarded everything to her email account and labeled the folder Truth. That folder would become the key to the case. No one knows for sure if Marissa confronted Daniel that night. There were no texts between them, and her phone showed no outgoing calls after 1:14 a.m. Some believe she waited until morning to speak to him. Others think he woke up and realized what she had done. What's certain is that by the time the sun rose, Marissa was dead and her phone was shattered on the floor. Unbeknownst to Daniel, Marissa's digital trail survived. The email she sent herself was still there, waiting. She had unknowingly documented her own final hours, leaving behind a map of betrayal, fear, and foresight. That quiet decision to check the phone and preserve the truth would become her final act of bravery, one that would eventually expose the person responsible for her death. By the time investigators arrived at the Holloway residence on the morning of June 3rd, the house felt staged, almost too perfect. Marissa's body was found in a clean hallway, free of any signs of a struggle. The gunshot wound was precise, a single bullet to the chest. There were no signs of forced entry, no defensive wounds, and no fingerprints out of place. It was a quiet, clinical scene that didn't match the chaos of a real break-in or a desperate act of violence. Detectives immediately began to question what really happened behind those walls. Daniel Holloway told police he had gone for his usual morning run at sunrise and returned home to find Marissa dead. He claimed he had no idea what had happened and suggested the possibility of a home invasion. But when officers reviewed the home's security system, a glaring inconsistency surfaced. The alarm hadn't been triggered. In fact, it had been manually disabled from the inside at 6:12 a.m., a full hour before Daniel made the 911 call. That meant someone inside the house had turned off the system shortly before Marissa was killed. Detectives began to notice other, strange details. Daniel was oddly composed for a man who had just lost his pregnant wife. He paced in front of the house, took phone calls, and never once asked to ride in the ambulance with Marissa's body. When asked about the location of his handgun, he claimed it was locked in a drawer, but a search of the bedroom showed the drawer was open and the gun was gone. The medical examiner later confirmed the bullet that killed Marissa matched the caliber of that missing weapon. The supposed morning jog became another point of suspicion. Daniel said he had left the house around 6:30 a.m., but a neighbor's security camera showed no sign of him leaving. There was no footage of him jogging past their house, no image of him on the sidewalk, and no trace of movement on his property during that time. If he hadn't left the house, the implication was chilling. He had been there the entire time and lied about it. As police pieced together the timeline, they began to see a clear picture. Marissa had likely discovered Daniel's secrets during the night. She documented everything and emailed it to herself before going to bed, or perhaps staying awake, waiting for morning. At some point, Daniel realized what she had done. Whether he saw her going through his phone or noticed the email on her screen, investigators believed he panicked. Facing exposure, financial ruin, and the collapse of his image, he made a decision that turned deadly. The theory was that Daniel retrieved his gun from the drawer, waited for the right moment, and shot Marissa as she walked away, perhaps on her way out the door. He shattered her phone to destroy evidence, unaware that she had already backed it all up. Then, he waited over an hour before calling the police, carefully constructing his alibi in that deadly silence. What he didn't anticipate was that Marissa had already secured her final words and proof in the cloud, making sure that even in death, she wouldn't be silenced. The arrest of Daniel Holloway came just 5 days after Marissa's murder. By then, the evidence was overwhelming. The email folder Marissa had labeled Truth contained hundreds of screenshots, messages, and photos, clearly documenting Daniel's affairs and exposing the cracks in their marriage. But more importantly, it proved motive. Marissa had uncovered everything, and Daniel had everything to lose. When detectives presented the digital evidence to him during a second round of questioning, his calm demeanor fractured. He stammered, avoided eye contact, and then stopped answering questions altogether. He was charged with first-degree murder and the unlawful death of an unborn child. The trial began nearly a year later, in April 2023, and captured public attention across the country. The courtroom was packed with reporters, neighbors, and Marissa's grieving family. The prosecution presented a timeline that outlined the events leading up to the murder in chilling detail. They described Daniel's financial struggles, the life insurance policies he had taken out, and the string of affairs that he kept secret. The centerpiece of their case was Marissa's digital evidence, her screenshots, her emails, and most haunting of all, the short video she recorded on her phone the night before she died. The jury watched in silence as the video played. In it, Marissa's voice was barely above a whisper. She scrolled through Daniel's text messages on his phone, the camera shaking slightly in her hand. Her breathing was shallow, and at the end, she said, "Now I know." The words were simple, but they landed with devastating weight. They were the last thing she recorded before her death, a quiet realization of betrayal that she would never have the chance to confront in life. The defense struggled to build a convincing counter-narrative. They argued that Daniel was under stress, that the shooting was accidental, that maybe Marissa had even turned the gun on herself in a moment of despair. But the forensics made that impossible to believe. The angle of the gunshot, the lack of gunpowder residue on her hands, and the fact that the gun was never recovered, all pointed back to Daniel. And then there was the timing of the 911 call, made nearly an hour after the alarm system had been turned off, and Marissa was likely shot. After a 2-week trial, it took the jury less than 4 hours to reach a verdict. Daniel Holloway was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge, in a rare moment of open emotion, called the crime an act of pure selfishness and brutality against a woman who trusted and loved you. The courtroom was silent as Marissa's family wept, not in triumph, but in pain. There was no real victory, only justice. Marissa never got to hold her son. She never got to start the life she had planned. But her voice, her strength, and her instincts ensured that the truth was not buried with her. Through her actions, she spoke beyond death. And in doing so, she made sure that her story would be heard, and that the man who silenced her would never be free again.